heard the phrase, life imitates art, or is more apt in my case, art imitates life. However, I never realized just how powerful that connection can be until in the middle of an interview when someone asked me about my life and how it's affected my work. As a scientist who studies data objectively collected from others, I never took time to pause and reflect on my own life and this beautiful connection. You see, I'm a relationship researcher. I was a former full-time academic with a research lab devoted to studying the science of relationships, and am now currently focusing on the therapeutic side of relationship work. My goal has been to study from a scientific perspective what love is, why some relationships thrive while others are doomed to fail, as well as to carefully analyze and shed light on the attachment bond or our human connection. After several years of focusing on this work and meeting an incredible network of people along the way, I have a better appreciation for the relationships in my own life. In hindsight, I have a better understanding of how deeply personal this journey has been for me. Today I'm here to discuss the science of relationships, as well as how looking back on our past relationships can enhance both our current and future connections. In my early to mid-20s, I was in a relationship that went through the stages of dating to marriage to divorce, all very quickly and very publicly. As we live in a social media age, each party and carefully curated component of the planning process played out on my Facebook feed. Then, once it all came crashing down, I spent hours, days, even weeks, painstakingly sifting through the remnants of my past with the goal of erasing what was and what could have been. I was the first of my friends to get married and the first to get divorced, and this all made for some very interesting gossip. Fast forward a few years to my experimental psychology classroom, in which I'm grasping at straws to cultivate an appreciation for statistics and research methodology, in one of those classes that students love to hate, or as many call it, a necessary evil of the major. To generate interest and help students see the applicability of research to the real world, and not just a grade, I pulled from all of the subject areas: neuropsychology, educational psychology, and the list goes on. I realized that as soon as I began to discuss relationships, blank stares turned into active participation as students began to ask the questions about the important relationships in their lives. Just then I realized something. I got them engaged, and I got them to care. Relationship science is a multidisciplinary field consisting of subject areas such as psychology, biology, sociology, anthropology, and philosophy. A variety of perspectives all converge to help explain the complexity and awesomeness that is love. So now that we know a little bit about what relationship science is, let's examine how many people there are out there for us to love, which involves estimating our pool of eligible partners. The Drake equation, conceptualized by Dr. Frank Drake in 1961, is an equation used to estimate the number of civilizations capable of supporting communicative extraterrestrial life in the Milky Way galaxy. Yes, you heard that correctly. It's an equation used to help us to determine how many aliens are out there. The equation is an approximation, and the thought behind it is that the series of over and underestimations will eventually cancel each other out and provide us with a relatively accurate final number. Dr. Peter Backus, economics lecturer in the UK, later adapted this equation to determine how many women there were out there for him to love by using available population parameters and the specifics as to what he was looking for in a mate. While I'm happily married, I'd like to illustrate this for you using the information that I used when I entered the wonderful, yet sometimes agonizingly frustrating world of online dating. Now, I was looking to meet someone in my geographic location, and based upon information from the US Census Bureau, New York City has 8,008,278 people that I can potentially date. 47.38% of these people are male, which equates to a total of 3,794,322 potential men that I could date. Of these people, 15.77% are between the ages of 35 and 44, leaving me with 598,364 potential partners. Education is important to me, and being that 37.4% of people have a bachelor's degree or higher, this leaves me with 223,788 potential partners. Now, I'm not that religious, but I am of the Jewish faith, and religion is more likely to become important when thinking about traditions or a future family. Since 13% of the population in New York City is Jewish, this leaves me with 29,092 potential partners. 53% of the population is unattached, and being that I want my partner and I to be in an exclusive relationship, this leaves me with 15,418 potential men. Now I'm 5'9", and I tend to feel uneasy when I'm much taller than my partners. No disrespect to anyone who's shorter, but this is something that makes me personally uncomfortable. So since 67% of men are 5'9" or taller, this leaves me with 10,330 potential partners. Now, Peter Backus said that he would find 5% of women attractive and 5% of women would find him attractive. However, Dr. Hannah Fry, mathematician and the author of Mathematics of Love, noted that this number was much too conservative and instead opted for 20%. So, if I'm likely to find 20% of these men attractive, that's 2,066 men, 20% are likely to find me attractive, that's 413 men, and 20% I'm likely to get along with in terms of personality. Out of the 8,008,278 people in New York City that I could potentially date, this leaves me with 82 men. Yes, 82 men. Now, you can choose to view this either positively or negatively. For those of you who view it negatively, finding your match is kind of like finding a needle in a haystack. In hindsight, had I realized just how quickly the dating pool shrank, I might not have approached online dating so optimistically. So maybe ignorance is bliss. However, if you choose to view the glass as half full, think about how just incredibly rare and special the person you're with, or meant to be with, actually is. Silver lining? So now that we know how many people are out there for us to love, how do we set ourselves up for relationship success? A big component of relationship satisfaction and success involves effectively communicating with the people we love. Renowned psychologist John Gottman, who studied healthy and unhealthy relationships, discussed the 4 horsemen, which are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. The presence of these horsemen during an argument is so detrimental, as it can escalate the negative interaction between partners during an argument, and it can even predict divorce. It's not what we fight about that leads to problems, but how we fight. I'll say that again. It's not what we fight about, but how we fight that matters. Many of the couples that I work with, once having learned about the 4 horsemen, note that had they been better prepared to effectively communicate with their partners, their relationships may have fared better. Hindsight's 20/20. Research supports this in that just by learning about the 4 horsemen, you can enhance your relationships. So you can use the science to examine your communication and improve your relationships going forward. Criticism involves attacking your partner's character. For example, you left the clothes on the floor because you're such a slob. Contempt is criticism coming from a place of superiority. Think criticism with a bit of sarcasm on top. An example is, well, of course you didn't get that promotion. You can't even get it together at home. This will last with your partner long after the fight is over. Defensiveness is when a person, rather than owning what he or she or they did wrong, calls his, her, or their partner out on something else. So rather than owning that you left your clothes in a pile on the floor, you say, well, what did you expect me to do? You took forever getting ready this morning. I'll get to stonewalling in a bit. To counteract criticism and contempt, use I statements or I language in which you focus on the behavior rather than attacking your partner. So you may say, when you leave your clothes on the floor, I get upset because I'm already running late trying to get out of the house in the morning. Yes, this does take longer, but by doing this, you're letting your partner know what you're thinking, as well as how his, her, or their behavior is affecting you. It doesn't mean you'll see eye to eye, but by doing this, you're communicating what the issue is and why it's upsetting to you. To counteract defensiveness, own it, whatever it is. If you own what you do wrong, hopefully your partner will follow suit, and then you'll create a culture of appreciation and respect. Finally, we have stonewalling. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard of the fight or flight response, but it's actually fight, fight, or flood. Fight, flight, or flood. If you get nothing else out of this talk today, you now have that fun little tongue twister. Stonewalling or flooding is when a person completely checks out. It's a situation in which, in the middle of an argument, a person goes completely blank and looks as if they're not even processing. Because in that moment, they can't. So what does the other person do? They get louder and angrier, further escalating that argument. Instead, take a break. Yes, for many, this is difficult, especially when in the middle of a heated argument. But by doing this, you're able to bring that physiological arousal level down so that you can come back to one another and have a much more productive and meaningful conversation. So just learning about the 4 horsemen can enhance your relationships. You can use this information to examine your communication rather than letting these tactics erode it, forcing you to look back on what could have been. So as you can see, this amazing science has implications for our everyday lives. But as art and science imitates life, my journey into this field was a result of a personal struggle. Could I have used the principles of relationship science to have avoided heartache? Perhaps. But remember, it's always easy to clearly evaluate a situation after it happens. As noted psychologist and economist Daniel Kahneman put it, everything makes sense in hindsight. I've made the conscious decision not to look back and continually overanalyze my past, which I often have the tendency to do. Instead, I've turned my past into a positive future. In my current role, I help others ask the meaningful questions they have about the important relationships in their lives. The most valuable lesson that I've learned is that your past shapes your present and sets a trajectory for your future. So you can use the knowledge of the value gained in hindsight to help inform the decisions you make in your current and future relationships. Now that's something worth re-examining the past for. Thank you.